Welcome to One Slot. I'm Felicity Ezewike. Today we will attempt an in-depth examination of the evolving United States military counter-terrorism architecture in West Africa and its implication for Nigeria, the Sahel, and regional stability. Last week, the U.S. and Nigerian government convened the inaugural U.S.-Nigeria Joint Working Group on Security Cooperation in Abuja, a move seen as a milestone in bilateral defense and intelligence collaboration. Now, all of this came on the heels of the surprise U.S. military airstrikes on Islamic State-linked targets in northwest Nigeria. That's on Christmas Day, an operation that analysts say marked a dramatic escalation of American involvement on Nigerian soil. Critics question the strike's tactical value and strategic clarity, while supporters argue it signals a firmer stance against expanding jihadist network. Let's not also forget that the Americans are also collaborating with the junta-led governments in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. All of that we will bring to this conversation. Our guests will help us cut through the headlines to explore what really is happening and what it means for regional security and sovereignty. Joining me now, Roland Stockton, Regional Director, TRAS Intelligence and Security Solutions Limited. Okay, I guess we only have him now. We're expecting two other guests, so a very warm welcome to Roland. Thank you very much for sparing the time to talk to us.
Always happy to do so.
All right, let's establish some premise, starting abroad. How has the threat landscape in West Africa, particularly with IS affiliates like ISWAP, evolved over the past few years, and why do you think it has now attracted a concentrated U.S. military interest?
I think, as we can see from the new president, they have everything is driven by what is best for America, particularly when it comes to rare earth minerals and other assets. You know, Trump's a businessman and he thinks like a businessman, not necessarily like the traditional politician or diplomat. And I think now that we've seen this evolution of the way that the Americans are operating, they're going more and more away from boots on the ground and more active military involvement in that respect, and more in the background, discreet sort of presence. When we look at the Ukraine and what may happen after the war with the Ukraine, the Americans have categorically stated that they're really, really interested in the mineral assets in Ukraine, but they do not want to put any troops on the ground. And then when we see now in other areas, Americans, I'm talking now about large concentrations of troops, not specialist units, are reluctant to be involved in any large-scale military operations of this nature. So it's driven by financial requirements, what's best for America strategically, and it's also driven by this recalibration of the way they operate, where they will be in the background providing intelligence, equipment, wherewithal, specialist troops where and when necessary, but they do not want to be involved in either, particularly in West Africa, having large bases on the ground. They lost the drone base in Niger and they don't want to do that again. They're working around it to be more mobile, more flexible, and to be in the right place at the right time and then strategically withdraw. The other thing is, it's in the big game where the Russians, the Chinese, and other interested parties are looking for political gains in Africa. And you see from the alliance of Sahel states who are more pro-Russia as opposed to pro-Western, diplomatic channels remain sort of open, and in a way, it takes away from the effectiveness of the fight against ISWAP, ISIS, because you've got a splintered set of countries not working coherently. So the Americans, on the one hand, are playing a very diplomatic game, and on the other hand, a sort of in the background military game where they will help, but they won't be boots on the ground, so to speak. And of course, at the back of all this is what is best for America.
All right. You've given us so much to chew on already, but I want us to go back to what happened in December. There's so much to talk about, but there was a strategic meeting recently, but that's an offshoot of what we know happened before December, on December Day. And it has marked an unusual shift, seeing U.S. forces striking against, inside Nigeria, against folks that they describe as Lakurawa jihadist. That has happened almost a month ago.
Yes.
Do we now have some clarity as to what exactly the targets were and what intelligence justified this unprecedented move? Because so far, all we've had is, yes, we targeted this, but we don't have data, we don't have figures, we don't have anything that signifies that, okay, this is what we accomplished with that strike.
I think what they were doing was they were drawing, I use the expression, a line in the sand or a red line. They were letting those groups know, who up until this moment really hadn't been in direct conflict with the Americans, so to speak. They'd been fighting the different militias and armed forces of the Sahel states, Nigeria and others. But the Americans were saying, you know, we're looking at what's going on, and this southern move by ISWAP and ISIS moving into Nigeria, and they're looking at saying, we have got to send a message. They did this in Syria, for example, when 3 Americans got killed by a fundamentalist Islamic group. The Americans reacted again with air-powered missile strikes and so on, but no boots on the ground. This was a similar thing. They were just letting them know, we are here, enough's enough, and we'll make an example. It doesn't necessarily have to be that they created a huge dent in the forces. It just has to let those people know, the Muslim fundamentalists, if you want to call them that enough is enough. We can strike you wherever we want. Militarily, it wasn't really, from a tactical, operational point of view, a great thing. Strategically, it was, though. And of course, the other thing is, of course, it highlights the fact that what really needs to be done, and I can see in recent press releases and discussions on your channel, for example, that the vacuum that has been left by the failure of governments and the tools of the governments to properly govern these areas in different ways, police, military, economically, and so on. And in addition, they are not addressing the issues that create the fertile breeding ground for these different terrorist groups: poverty, regional conflicts, conflicts between different ethnic groups, conflicts between farmers and those people who have cattle and sheep and so on and so forth. So there is a great deal of things to be done by Nigerian government, by the Sahel states and so on and so forth. But this military strike was just addressing one of those issues and sort of, in a way, hoping to galvanize the governments to work more.
And hear me, Roland, I'm trying to interject. If you see the narrative coming off this strike, Donald Trump himself, he tweeted about it. I mean, he saw it as a huge success. The Nigerian government also confirmed that it was a collaborative effort. And I mean, even though it was some sort of, the jihadists and the terrorists and the bandits are killing people, kidnapping people, you know, making good on their threats. And then your suggestion is that this was just some tactical move to show that they are serious about, if we don't...
I beg your pardon?
Hello, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, certainly, yes, okay. I can now, yes. So the last part...
Okay, I was talking more about, however the strategy may be, there has to be an impact for us to say rather, it was, you know, it hit the mark. So no data so far. We don't know if civilians were affected by it or anything. So isn't that a bit contradictory to the purpose of a strike? I don't know if you get me, or that was too much of a mouthful.
Yes. I was surprised by the lack of data coming out as well. Because normally after a strike like this, you do a post-mission flyover to see how effective your strike has been and what you've done and so on and so forth. And this is just a normal routine. So, you know, a bomb damage assessment, reconnaissance flight, all that sort of thing. But nothing, I suppose they will have done. But why they've released no figures, of course, not wishing to go down any conspiracy theory or whatever, that didn't actually achieve what they wanted it to do so. But also, I mean, once they've done this, it would have been a golden opportunity.
I'm so sorry again. I have to interject, but please do not lose your thoughts. We will come back to you. Before we went on that break, we were talking about, you know, the impact of the strikes here in Nigeria. Would you want to conclude your thoughts on that, or we should just move on?
Yes, the strike, as I said, sent a message, a strategic level, to the terrorists, though maybe they're not bright enough to understand, because as we've seen by recent events, there's still some issues going on. I think moving on from that, it highlights other areas of concern, but it does show that the Americans are reaching out to partners in Africa, Nigeria, and we've already mentioned the Sahel states, the Alliance of Sahel states, though they're doing that in a slightly different way. But of course, the thing is, the people are moving, it's sort of a southerly sweep from Somalia going down, and the Americans want to block it and stop the encroachment of ISIS. And they've decided that this is the line where they're going to make the stand, and with partnering with the Nigerians and others, this was a message that was sent out. However, dropping bombs has some effect, but it's not going to be the main thing that will stop this encroachment. And as your president was just saying there, economic measures are needed to lift the population from poverty, which is the breeding ground for terrorist recruitment. So that was an interesting snippet from the previous topic that you were showing. But if you wish, we could move on and discuss whatever you like.
All right. I understand we now have Chris Otieno joining us. Chris, if you can hear me, thank you very much for being here with us. I know we had network challenges connecting with you. I'll just jump in and ask you your thoughts to the mandate and strategic objectives of the U.S.-Nigeria Joint Working Group on Security Cooperation now. I mean, they just finished their meeting the other day.
It is good. Thank you, first of all, for having me. I'm grateful, Ronald. Good to see you from Netherlands. It is good to have partners who can assist or who can work with us in trying to eliminate jihadist violences across the region. And it's commendable that Nigeria has found a partner in the United States of America who have gone ahead to support some of their efforts in thwarting jihadist extremists in the Republic of Nigeria. But we are telling ourselves we still need more. More needs to be done. Very few items came out of that bombing. We have very little data to justify or tell us if we actually achieved some commendable results, because a few days, weeks thereafter, there was mass abduction from Kaduna State of about 171 church-going persons, and I think more needs to be done. Yes, we are there with good partners, but more needs to be done to really draw a thin line that if you attack us, we will attack you. If you try anything violent against us, we shall respond. Our response shall be amicable. Or even before you try doing that, we'll have the intelligence to know that what you want to do, and we shall be able to deter you from doing what you want to. That could guarantee some level of security and guarantee some safety across the Republic of Nigeria and any other African country that faces this kind of jihadist, violent people.
All right, gentlemen, I'll urge you to stay with us. We need to go on a very short break. We'll be right back. Thank you for staying with us. We'll continue our conversation, taking a look at U.S. interventions in Africa and particularly in Nigeria. Paul went on that break. Chris was speaking, talking to us about his thoughts on the collaboration we've seen between the U.S. and Nigeria. Please go ahead.
Yes, what I was saying, thank you very much for having me again. It is important for African countries to build a network of partners that can help them or can assist, can come in terms of resources, that is financial, human, and material, for us to be able to wage the right response required with the reference to teams or persons that are attacking us or waging war against various areas of our many republics of Africa. U.S. did very well, that bombing, but we are telling ourselves the communication thereafter should have been done effectively to create the notion that, yes, the intervention was quite effective and we were able to deter probably attacks that were being set for the future. But then, soon as the Kaduna attack came up, then we found a negative rhetoric or negative publicity going into that space, and that did not work very well in terms of the achievement that we had registered following or subsequent to that United States of America attack in collaboration with the Nigerian army. So more needs to be done on the part of communication. More needs to be done in terms of ground intervention, because air intervention could not have been quite effective enough owing to the non-emergence of data with reference to the impact of that particular attack.
Let's talk about agendas here. The working group meeting here in Abuja was charged with politics when Alison Hooker, the number 3 at the State Department, pushed the Nigerian government to protect Christians in a speech that did not mention other groups, Muslim victims of armed groups in the country. Given what we know about the diplomatic friction over religious violence framing in Washington and here in Nigeria, that's the capital, Abuja now, how do you think this would affect the military cooperation? Will this fuel concerns that they're working at cross-purpose, or this shouldn't be an issue if targets remain the same?
When it comes to the military, we are always very clear in terms of our orders, and we want to separate politics from the military. We are very clear and know that political class can make statements that would seem as though they're not creating any mileage. But when it comes back to the military, we are very clear. We know how we run our partnerships. We know what our military attaches in various republics who are our partners. We know the work they do. We know what they're supposed to report back. We know what they're supposed to take out there. So yes, that would have some diplomatic ripples between the two nations. But military cooperation still remains intact, with nothing that we can say would jeopardize the milestones that we have achieved, or that we already achieved, when it comes to that military cooperation that we have. So yes, I am firm that yes, that was just a political statement, would have a few frictions on the diplomatic front, but on military cooperation, near zero impact.
The U.S. is deploying in West Africa. When you talk about, you talked a lot about, briefly about the fact that they don't want to remain in locations where they have been ousted in the junta-led government areas. So talk to us about what they will be deploying. Would it be more of surveillance? Would it be more of training, or more of intelligence?
Okay. I think the Americans, like a number of countries, they learned the lessons, painful lessons, from Afghanistan and from the Middle East, and they don't want to make those mistakes again. So I suspect you will not see large American bases cropping up across Africa. They are now more likely to as the situation develops, they will provide the wherewithal and the intelligence, the logistics, and maybe small specialized units to assist the government's own particular organs, the police or military or paramilitaries, whatever they use in the fight. But you will see the Americans, they're moving towards a lighter, more flexible counter-terror posture built on intelligence, mobility, and selective partnerships. They are not going to have huge bases, as we've mentioned a couple of times, the drone base they had in Niger and so on and so forth. Once bitten, twice shy, as the saying goes. So we're not going to see a huge buildup of American troops anywhere because of painful lessons learned from past military adventures. So I think we'll see more strategic partnerships and joint training being given by specialist American teams. Perhaps other countries could join in to the different militaries in the different countries and different police forces, but they will not be involved in large numbers. So it's going to be beholden upon Nigerian army, Nigerian police, the alliance of the Sahel states in a different way, their militaries, their police, their government organs, the economic or whatever, to deal with the situation on the ground, with the Americans taking, I don't like to say sort of a backwards placing, because they're not, but they certainly will not be involved in ground combat fighting and so on and so forth on a large scale.
All right. Chris, the Africom's Deputy Commander, John Brenham, said something as regards the Sahel as a whole. He said that they are collaborating, that they still collaborate with the junta-led governments in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, which we know have broken away from other West African neighbors and largely shunned the West. He said they've shared information with some of them to attack key terrorist targets. I'm paraphrasing him now. And he also says they still talk to their military partners across Sahelian states, though it is not official. And that's where I was headed. What do you think of this move, this strategy of continuing interactions despite restrictions?
I do not think there would be anything quite formidable to stop any forms of cooperation. I don't think there's anything formidable enough to stop intelligence sharing or supporting initiatives, despite the fact that we have a history here and there. So I am a firm believer that whatever statement was made could be two things. One could be a statement to encourage themselves to go back to diplomatic tables to sort out what has happened between the two nations and the various other items that have come in there. We know Russians have moved in pretty fast to fill up the gap that has been left by European nations. So there's still competition on who is a preferred partner when it comes to Sahel regions as compared to East and West positions. Having made that statement, it's very clear there for that. There's still a lot of interest. We know very well that America spearheads a lot of anti-terrorist activities in the globe. And that could just be another front where they are taking precedent or taking preeminence to ensure that they are responding pretty well to any terrorist activities that are taking root or could be taking root across the African nations. And that serves quite a lot. That serves better for the Burkina Faso nations, other Sahel nations, if they find credible partners that can go out of their way to really support them resource-wise, support them in terms of human capital, support them in terms of capacity and capability training to better their people in terms of response to counterterrorism. So I believe and I know that yes, that is happening, but could be happening below or under the tables. Not quite clear diplomatic paths that can be done. It could be through other partners, for example, intermediary parties that can be able to make communication between the two nations and various other nations in that particular kind of a form. So yes, those kind of efforts
speak to
could be
me
happening.
further. Speak to me further, like a toddler who needs to really understand this. You're explaining that we can have military collaboration devoid of political interference and diplomatic issues. Am I getting that?
Yes, that can happen. And it has happened in very many situations. Yes, it has happened. Nations could project themselves out here in the public as enemies, but under the ground, you'll find them negotiating. A very good example. America has a national policy, not negotiating terrorists. But how often have we seen them talk to the Taliban of Afghanistan? Very many times. We have seen them come to the table and talk. We have seen them talk through proxies and end up resolving matters that are there between the two of them. So yes, that is a possibility that can happen. It is a practical item that can happen between nations that could, in the forefront, I mean, in the public glare, seemingly enemies who don't talk to each other. There has been talks between Israel and Iran. We cannot say that cannot happen. Qatar has been there mediating between these two nations and various other avenues. It does happen.
Okay, I needed that because it was resounding in my head. I needed to be clear. That was what I understood from your submission. Roland, what is your thought about West Africa's strategy from the U.S. and how it is integrating with AFRICOM's larger responsibility across the Sahel and Lake Chad Basin region?
I think it's to be applauded. The willingness for not just Nigeria but other countries to reach out and ask, can you help us? Can you assist? And to make up any shortfall. No country is totally self-sufficient nowadays. Even the Americans, lots of countries, they cannot do things alone. This is why you have NATO, for example. So I think you will see now, with these steps being taken, the Americans, as I said, they will be reaching out to who they consider favorable nations to stop the impact of the ISIS or ISWAP insurgents, for example, but also they're reaching out because long-term strategy is to stop Russians and Chinese, their main competitors, from establishing a stronger foothold in Africa and elsewhere, of course. So I think you will see more of this activity in the future, where the Americans will be, as Chris has already mentioned, what you call diplomatic back channels for those countries that are not necessarily in the public eye, pro-American, pro-Western, but in real politics, geopolitics, they see the writing on the wall, and these other avenues will be used to foster a growing relationship, not necessarily in the public eye, but to ensure that the threats that we've talked about are stopped in their tracks. So you will see more and more, not necessarily public cooperation, but it will be taking part either in the public eye or in the shadows, as Chris has mentioned, with Qatar. For example, the British government met with the IRA on a number of occasions, so on and so forth. So these things go on, of course they do.
All right, Chris, in my introduction to this conversation, I talked about us taking time to look at the evolving U.S. military counter-terrorism architecture in West Africa, with particular attention to what has happened with Nigeria recently. And we know that there was an inaugural U.S.-Nigeria joint working group on security cooperation just on Friday here. There are concerns about Nigerians' sovereignty. Will this be factored into the planning of joint operations? Because there were whispers about that earlier attack in December, particularly those involving U.S. kinetic support.
when two nations have military cooperation and they recognize their sovereignties, it is quite clear that the attack, the kinetic propulsion at Nigeria was done, of course, with authorization from the Nigerian government, particularly the highest office of the president. It cannot be done without that kind of authorization, because these two countries are not enemies, they are partners, and they will work together to ensure that this kind of item is brought there. Equally, if I may say, out of my own thought, America is having a strategy of projecting itself globally as still the leader of the world order. We have seen what they did in Venezuela. We have seen what they've done in Middle East. We have seen what they've done in Nigeria. So with the slightest opportunity, I do think, for my own analogy, that America will take advantage of its partnerships and use that to flex its military muscle to try as much as possible and bring down the possibility of it being thought as a world global power that is on the decline. They will do that. They will support their partners. Where they see states are not...
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just told we had 1 more minute, so I will give you maybe 15 seconds to conclude your thought and then go over to Roland for another 15.
Thank you. I do support, I'm a proponent that African nations must form very good partnerships, and these partners must be mutually beneficial, not partnerships that are skewed towards one direction. No, that is what has brought out of Sahel nations out of ECOWAS. So we must go ahead and really form partnerships that are beneficial to both nations. We should form military cooperations, of course, to help us in bolstering our security postures in the African continent. And we must find material, men, and money to be able to launch our own supports and our own operations.
Roland, in 15 seconds, your final thoughts on the subject.
Okay, so West Africa's security future hinges on whether the governments and partners can outpace the threats evolving around them. The stakes are rising and the world is watching. In the end, the real test isn't the strength of the US airstrikes, it's whether regional leaders can build the stability militants can no longer exploit.
All right, Chris and Roland, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Nice chatting to you. Nice to see you again, Chris. Good evening, everybody. Take care. Stay safe.
Good evening, Roland. See you.
Right.
Thank you.
I am frankly grateful to my guests for their breakdown of what is perhaps one of the most consequential shifts in West African security in recent memory, from the unexpected airstrikes to new cooperative frameworks. The core of the US-Nigeria counter-terrorism strategy are being redrawn with significant implications for the region. Thank you very much for being with us. We will be back here next week. Hopefully we'll take on the second part of this conversation. We couldn't because of the live coverage we had to do earlier. I'll see you next week. I'm Felicity Ezewike.